A weird coincidence happened yesterday. Posted by Steph Jane Manchester. So I had a job interview yesterday morning. The taxi driver had a nightmare finding the office, as side entrance down an alley under old railway arches and lots of construction work going on. Area has really changed. Finally found it and walked in and got a strange feeling that I had been there before. Anyway, got the job. Then I rang my mum and she asked where it was. So I said the old building opposite the church on Chapel Street. She said, "The one down the alley?" I said, "Yes." She said, "That was your dad's old office where I used to take you as a child." How strange is that? I had said a little prayer to my late dad the night before, asking him to wish me luck. Now, I am working in his old workplace. Our experience was something mysterious in Zion. Posted by Josie Machine. This story took place back in the winter of 1997. Me and my friend, who I will call Will, were camping in Zion National Park, Utah. I'm not sure whether or not camping is or was legal at the time, as we're both devout Mormons. So we were visiting the area to connect to other like-minded people. We first went to the park sometime in the middle of January, so the weather was very frigid. We decided to make a camp in a small clearing somewhere near the Great Staircase. We set a small tent up underneath a few trees. Things went fine for the first few nights. On the third morning, Will woke up in a cold sweat in the wee hours. He had had a vivid nightmare of a creature with matte black eyes following him through the canyon. We brushed it off as just that, a nightmare. Later that morning, we went up to the ridge to do some sightseeing. Will was eerily quiet. I asked him if he was all right, and he told me he had been to this part of the park before. Neither of us had been here in the days prior, and he realized he had seen it in his dream. We were both spooked, but brushed it off as coincidence. We went back to camp later that afternoon, and we thought nothing of the coincidence from earlier. That night, when we went to cook up some of the hot dogs we'd brought along with us, we searched and searched for them, but they were all missing. Once again, we just assumed we mustn't have packed them. But Will was certain he saw them earlier that day. We decided not to worry about it, and we ate some protein bars we had packed for hiking. Things went fine for the rest of the night, but we couldn't help but feel there was something wrong. 2 days later, Will woke up in the night again. This time was different though. His nose was bleeding, thick black blood, and his shirt was covered in dirt and mud. One other minor detail I forgot to mention is he woke up 2 miles from the tent. I only found him because I heard him screaming from out in the brush. I went and found him and helped him get home back to. When we returned, we found a small bird skull on top of Will's bedroll. The howls of the coyotes and other similar creatures we had heard in the nights prior were non-existent, leaving the canyon strangely silent. And later that day, we went out for another hike. We were about 8 miles from our camp at that point, and being that this was the days before cell phones and we were in a canyon, there was no way we could contact for help if we got lost or injured. Our car was at least a 6-hour hike from where we were camping. We happened by a small clearing, and at the edge of the tree line, we found a small cave. Being the naive, curious young boys we were, we ventured out in search of adventure. Inside the cave, there was no sound but the echoes of our footsteps. The ground was strewn with bones of small birds, not dissimilar to the skull we found on Will's bedroll. Will went to inspect one of the skulls. However, upon picking it up, we both had an overwhelming sense of dread filling us both. Our ears began to ring intensely, and our heads began to vibrate violently. The sound was like static from a radio, and it caused us both an immediate terrible headache. I screamed at Will. We needed to leave, but he couldn't hear me over the static ringing. I couldn't even hear myself. I grabbed his arm and we ran for the mouth of the cave. We decided we'd had enough and we were going to leave. The ringing subsided as we got further from the cave. However, As we neared the camp, the sense of dread became even stronger. The camp had been destroyed. Our equipment was left dangling from trees. We tried to collect our things, but we were too overcome with fear. We didn't hesitate. We picked up what things of value we could carry, and we began the long walk back to my car. It was about 5 p.m. by this point, and if we started walking now, we'd be back to the car by about 11. We trekked back with no issue for about 2 hours. By 7 p.m. it was pitch black, and there was no light. Except from Will's lighter, the forest was suddenly filled with the sounds of hundreds of creatures howling and crying. We could make out the silhouettes of several tall deer along one of the high cliff faces. The deer looked sickly, and their eyes were blacker than the sky. We tried to ignore them, but it seemed they were following us. We dropped everything and just began to run. Somehow we made it back to the car in just a couple hours. The sounds of the forest didn't die down for the entirety of the journey. Once we got back to the car, we assumed the battery would be dead, as we had unintentionally left the car lights on for several days. Luckily, almost as if it were a miracle, the car started fine, and we got out of the park without a hitch. As of writing this, it has been 23 years since this happened, but the story still haunts me. I hadn't seen Will in several years, as he had moved away to a different state. I decided to write our story in honor of his memory, as I learned this morning of his passing. He had been suffering from mild depression long before our experience, but I feel that the traumatic nature of the event only amplified his condition. To this day, I don't have a clue what it was in the park, as I have never told the story to a single person until now. Will and I never even spoke of the events after they happened, and I would like to believe it was all just a nightmare or shared delusion, but we know it was much more than that. Anyways, that's our story. I know it was long, but it means a lot to have shared it with someone. In loving memory of Will Foster. Fly high, brother. The Weird Bathroom Stall. Posted by Naya Marks. This happened to me 2 years ago, but I still think about it from time to time, because we still visit this place, and so every time we do, I or my parents always mention what happened. So one day, my parents and I went to this Asian supermarket that we go to every so often, that's in a city about 2 hours from our town, that we frequently hang out in. We already had a long day, and I was tired. So I decided to just wait in the car while my parents went inside. Later on, I had to use the restroom, so I texted my dad that I was leaving the car and coming in to use the restroom. I ran into him in the store first, so he talked to me for a little bit. I noticed my mom wasn't with him, and he told me she went to use the restroom too. So I went to the bathroom, which is pretty tiny. There's only 3 stalls. And as I walk in, I can see under the first stall, and I literally see my mom's shoes. Or so I thought. I went into the stall next to her, and as I walk past her stall, I can see through the door crack her hair. Or so I thought. When I was done, I went to wash my hands. I never said anything to her though, because there were some other people in the bathroom too. So I didn't feel like calling out to her, but they eventually left. So I'm just waiting by the sink, wondering what's taking her so long. Eventually, some other old ladies come into the bathroom, and every single one that came in pressed on the first stall's door, my mom's door. But it didn't open, since it was locked, because obviously someone was in there. So they all used the other 2 stalls. Some women who came in even stood back in front of the stall and saw the shoes, so they knew the stall was occupied. About 10 minutes passed, and everyone who came into the bathroom already came and went. And I'm still wondering, oh my God, what the heck is taking her so long? So I finally say something to her, but she didn't answer me. Then I decided to press on her door, and the freaking door opened, even though it was just locked the entire time as other people tried to go in, and we all saw someone's shoes under there. The stall is 100% empty, and there's no shoes. Well, I get the fuck out of there and find my dad, and my mom is with him too. I was like, what the fuck? I told them what happened, as they were spooked too. Turns out my mom never even went to the bathroom yet. She decided to look for something elsewhere in the store first. I still have no idea or explanation on what that was.